So this is the helping counseling and the helping relationship part 2. So behaviorists are the rivals to analysts. So remember when we were saying that the experiment for little Hans was Freud used that to support analysis or psychoanalysis theory, and disprove or go against behavioristic because they were seeing in the case of little Hans his phobia preventing him from going into the streets and having a horse bite him, which was explained using the Oedipus complex and the castration anxiety. So remember that behaviorists are the rivals to analysts. Behaviorists are um, baseline. A behaviorist term indicates the frequency that a behavior is manifested prior to or in the absence of treatment. Behaviorists strive for symptom reduction and do not believe in the concept of symptom substitution. So you don't substitute the symptom from one symptom to another, you reduce it. So think systematic desensitization. They are trying to improve the phobia, the improve the response to the phobia. So behaviorists are the rivals to analysts. They use a they use the term baseline. A behaviorist term indicates the frequency that a behavior is manifested prior to or in the absence of treatment. So baseline is the measurement of what and how often it occurs without any treatment. Behaviorists strive for symptom reduction and do not believe in the concept of symptom substitution. Interpersonal therapy, IPT, is a short term solution focused treatment mainly for clients who have depression. Remember, interpersonal is social and solution focused. And we know interpersonal was our one of our neo-Freudians, Harry S. Sullivan, remember Harry S. Sullivan studied interpersonal relationships in adolescent stages. I guess I could have put this on part one because it is still kind of dealing with psychoanalysis. But just to repeat, interpersonal therapy, IPT, is a short term solution focused therapy for treatment, mainly for clients who have depression. Interpersonal equals social and solution focused. So that's kind of what I did, kind of how I go about things, like expanding their social lives, getting back to those habits and things that make them happy is solution focused, like we're moving towards a direction and a goal. So we have Joseph Walpay, who is the pioneer founder of systematic desensitization and subjective units of disturbance scale, SUDS, SUDS. Subjective units of disturbance scale, SUDS, are used to form a hierarchy of anxiety to perform systematic desensitization. So SUDS are created through the process of introspection by rating the anxiety associated with the situation. Introspection is any process where a person tries to express themselves or describe thoughts or feelings. So that's just a nice definition to know, is that introspection is any process where a person tries to express themselves or describe thoughts or feelings. So going back to SUDS, Generally, it uses a 0 to 100 scale. The order of hierarchy is from least anxiety arousing to the most anxiety evoking items. Ideally, you will want 10 to 15 evenly spaced items. So just think about subjective units of disturbance scale. Think about it literally as a scale, and they're going to um, on that they're going to form a hierarchy of anxiety. So what is least anxiety producing to the most, and they're going to do so on a 0 to 100 scale through the process of introspection, expressing themselves and describing their thoughts and feelings. Systematic desensitization is a form of behavior therapy that strives to weaken a client's response to an anxiety producing stimuli. It curbs phobic reactions, anxiety, and avoidance responses to innocuous or harmless situations. It's based off it's based on Pavlov's classical conditioning and effective due Hold on. Systematic desensitization is a form of behavior therapy that strives to weaken a client's response to an anxiety producing stimuli. It curbs phobic reactions, anxiety, and avoidance responses to innocuous which is harmless situations. It's based on Pavlov's classical conditioning and is effective due to counter conditioning. So counter conditioning is um, pairing a positive reaction or a positive condition to a negative one. So to get give me just a second, I'm gonna get the exact definition of counter conditioning. So, counter conditioning is a behavioristic technique in which the goal is to weaken or eliminate a learned response by pairing it with a stronger or desirable response. So, counter conditioning is a behavioristic technique in which the goal is to weaken or eliminate a learned response. So, like, think about like if you see a spider and then you cry, you that's a because the bigger the spider, the more you're going to cry, like the more your reaction is going to be. So that's a learned response. Like, say if you saw your sister do it, so now you do it. It's a learned response. So you want to pair it with a stronger or desirable response. So, yeah, systematic desensitization is based on Pavlov's classical conditioning and is effective due to counter conditioning. Systematic desensitization includes relaxation training, construction of anxiety hierarchy, which is SUS, subjective units of disturbance scale, then desensitization in imagination, which is interposition, and then in vivo desensitization, which is outside the imagination. So we know desensitization in your imagination can be called interposition, but it can also be called covert desensitization. Covert means hidden. And in vivo is going to be outside the imagination or in real life. In vivo shouldn't take place until the client has desensitized to 75% of the hierarchy items. Treatments derived from Pavlov's classical conditioning include systematic desensitization, assertiveness training, flooding, and it can also look like flooding with response prevention, implosive therapy, and sensate focus. In our box of things to know, we have Arnold Lazarus worked closely with Joseph Walpay. Does his, because remember, we know we link Arnold Lazarus as a behaviorist with the systematic desensitization and M&M, multimodal approach. Arnold Lazarus was very holistic, which holistic means they emphasize the person as a whole, but he has a strong behavioral treatment slant. Because remember, we link him to the systematic D. When practicing multimodal therapy, the counselor focused on 7 key modalities or areas of the client's functioning. So, in his multimodal therapy or his multimodal approach, um, he has 7 key modalities or 7 key principles or areas of the client's functioning that the counselor should focus on. And that's the basic id. Remember, basic id. That's B, behavior, including acts, habits, and reactions. A, affective responses, such as emotions, feelings, and mood. S, sensations, including hearing, touch, sight, smell, and taste. So think S, sensations, your senses, your 5 senses. I, imagery or images, the way we perceive ourselves, including memories and dreams. So, imagery or images is how we perceive ourselves, and that can include how we our memories and our dreams. C, cognitions such as thoughts, insights, and philosophy of life. Because remember, C, cognitions or cognitive is your thought process. I, interpersonal relationships, the way we interact with others. D, drugs, including legal, which would be legal, illegal, prescription use, diet, and a nutritional supplementation. So the basic id, behavior, affective, sensations, imagery, cognitions, interpersonal, drugs. Basic id. So then we have Yerkes Dodson law, a moderate amount, which says a moderate amount of arousal can be a plus since it keeps arousal at a moderate level. So Yerkes Dodson law says a moderate amount of arousal can be a plus since it keeps arousal at a moderate level. So moving on to another important behavior, no, not a behaviorist, a neo-Freudian who studied under Freud is Carl Jung. He's the founder of analytic psychology, which makes sense because he came under Freud, who was psychoanalytic theory, therapy. But Carl Jung is the founder of analytic psychology. He's a psychologist. He said that men operate on logic or the logos principle, while women are intuitive, operating on the eros principle. So men are logic, logos, women are intuitive, eros. He said that society calls men to deny their feminine side, known as anima, and women deny their masculine side, known as animus. And remember, we learned that anima, what was that? Because it's anima and animus is used to describe like male versus female. Oh, animism. So Carl Jung, the father of analytic psychology, believed in animism, which occurs when a child acts as if non-living objects have lifelike abilities and tendencies. Anima means it has female characteristics, and a must has male characteristics. So going back to Carl Jung and the principle of animism, it can also be applied to humans. Society calls men to deny their feminine side, the anima side, and women deny their masculine side, the animus side. Collective unconscious says all humans have collected, universal, inherited, unconscious neural patterns. So we've all collected universal, unconscious neural patterns. That's collective unconscious. Carl Jung also stated the material that makes up the collective unconscious, which is passed down through generations, is known as the archetypes. So, archetypes is the material that makes up the collective unconscious, which is passed down through generations. Archetypes are primal universal symbols, which means the same thing to all men and women. So, like an archetype can be the cross. Archetypes are primal universal symbols, which means the same thing to all men. Examples of archetypes that we'll see on the test is the persona. The persona is a mask or role we present to others to hide our true selves. The persona is the mask or role we present to others to hide our true selves. Anim, anim, animism or animus, anima, which is also our self, that can be our masculine energy or feminine energy. The shadow is the mask behind the persona, which contains id like material, and id like material being sex and life instincts that is denied yet desired. So the shadow is the mask behind the persona, which contains id like material that is denied yet desired. Is the shadow is also called the dark side of the personality, though it is not necessarily negative. It's not negative, it's just the dark side. It's those things that we deny but we desire, the things we try and hide. The shadow is the unconscious opposite of the individual's conscious expression. Is evident in dreams and in projection. Then we have the hero, which represents a champion defender. And we have the wise old woman. She's helpful and a symbol of female nature. Carl Jung used drawings balanced around a center point to analyze himself, clients, and dreams called mandalas. So, mandalas was our drawings that contained hmm, he used drawings balanced around a center point to analyze himself, clients, and dreams. Those are called mandalas. In his writings, the mandalas also can stand for a magic protective circle that represents self unification. Under Carl Jung, we have introversion versus extroversion. Think introverted personality, extroverted personality. Introversion, a turning in of the libido. An introverted individual is his or her own primary source of pleasure. Typically, they shy away from social situations if possible. So you're your own source of pleasure when you're introverted. Extroversion is the tendency to find satisfaction and pleasure in other people. They seek external rewards. We have the Myers Briggs Type Indicator under Carl Jung. Myers Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI. We'll definitely see this on the test. Is the most widely used measure of personality preferences and dispositions. It's used to assess upper elementary children age 12 and older all the way through adulthood and yields a four-letter code or type based on four bipolar scales. So it's used from the age 12 and up, and you will get a four-letter code which describes your type. In that four-letter code, it would be introversion. It will say if you're introverted or extroverted. It will say describe you as sensing or intuition. Sensing is current perception. Things Sensing is current perception. You perceive things how they currently are. You sense them in the present. While intuition is future abstractions and possibilities. So sensing is the now, intuition is the future. Thinking or feeling. Do you Are you logical or are you emotional? Thinking or feeling. And then judging or perceiving. Judging is organizing and controlling the outside world, or perceiving, observing the outside world. Like, do you just sit back, people watch? It's like they do what they do, or do you judge? Like, you want to control or dictate or determine or help or assist and organize what other people are doing. So that's the Myers Briggs type personality. MBTI is a personality preference and disposition test or indicator for 12 and older. Use a four-letter code, four-letter code or type. Extroversion or introversion, sensing or intuition, thinking or feeling, judging or perceiving. Then we have transactional analysis, TA. With transactional, it makes me think of money. Bernie Sanders was trying to give us money back in student loan reimbursement. Bernie and Bernays. Eric Benet, transactional analysis, money, student loans, Bernie Sanders, Eric Benet. So Eric Benet created transactional analysis. It's based in messages learned about self in childhood, determine where person is good or bad, through though intervention can change this script. So the messages you received and learned as a child determine whether a person sees themselves as good or bad, and through intervention, you can change the script. So transactional analysis is a cognitive approach. It's based on intellectual approach or intellectual feelings. Is used by psychoanalysis to help clients determine their ego states in order to understand behavior. It focuses on interactions between people, and communication is very important. So let's go over that again because that's the basis and the foundation of transactional analysis, which is used by psychoanalysis to help clients determine their ego states in order to understand behavior. It focuses on interactions between people, and communication is very important. So let's go over that again because that's the basis and the foundation of transactional analysis, which is used by psychoanalysis to help clients determine their ego states in order to understand behavior. It focuses on interactions between people, and communication is very important. So it posits three ego states: the child, the adult, the parent. The child is like the little kid within, can manifest as the natural child, adopted child, or the little professor. The natural child is spontaneous, impulsive, and untrained. The little professor acts on hunches, often without the necessary information. The adopted child learns how to comply to avoid a parental slap on the hand. So when you think a natural child is like fun, rambunctious, spontaneous, they're just wild in them. The little professor, he's a little detective, he's smart, but he doesn't know everything. So he doesn't necessarily like Tommy off of the Rugrats. The little professor that's perfect. Tommy off the little Rugrats is the little professor, acting off of hunches, but most of the time did not have the necessary information. And then the adapted child. Sorry, it says adapted, not adopted. The adapted child, but think kind of like adopted. Like they're adopted. They don't want to get in trouble, so they comply to avoid a parental slap on the hand. The adapted child, and think even with children, like if children get popped and reprimanded often, then they typically will start complying because they don't want the slap on the hand. So that's the child ego state. The adult focuses on facts and not feelings. The adult is rational and logical. The parent is concerned with moral behavior. If a child has nurturing caretakers, he or she is said to develop nurturing parent qualities such as being non judgmental and sympathetic to others. However, the opposite can occur with prejudicial prejudicial and critical messages, such as being intimidating, bossy, or know it alls, which is the critical parent. The critical parent is the master of the should, oughts, and must. So, under the parent stage, which the parent is concerned with the moral behavior, we have the nurturing parent, the critical parent, the incomplete parent, and the prejudicial parent. So the nurturing parent says if a child has nurturing caretakers, he or she is said to develop nurturing parent qualities. That's going to be being non judgmental and sympathetic to others, nurture others. The critical parent is going to be intimidating, bossy, and know it alls. Is the critical parent is the master of the should, oughts, and must. An individual whose caretaker left or died at an early stage might be plagued with what TA refers to as the incomplete parent. This persona could expect others to parent him or her throughout life, or might use the lack of parenting as an excuse for poor behavior. So that's the incomplete parent, where they may expect others to act or feel that parent role due to losing their parents at an early age, or they'll use the loss of their parent as an excuse to act poorly. On some tests, the prejudicial parent may appear who is opinionated with biases not based on facts. So think prejudice. They're people who are prejudiced are opinionated, they have biases, and there's just no facts to it. So the ego states under transactional analysis corresponds with Freud's structural theory, which is the id, ego, and superego. Neither characterize these ego states as by neither, meaning Freud nor Bernays, characterize these ego states as biological entities, meaning they are hypothetical constructs used to explain the function of the personality. So they just structural theory and the ego states explain the function of the personality. It is not backed by medicine or a medical process for confirmation. So the structural analysis under transactional analysis is when a counselor analyzes out of which ego state a client is primarily operating, describing the client using the PAC conceptualization, parent, adult, child. So, structural analysis is when the counselor is analyzing out of which ego state a client is operating. Second order transactional, uh, sorry, second order structural analysis is when a counselor analyzes an ego state within an ego state. So that would be the critical parent or the nurturing parent. Since the critical or nurturing parent is a type of parent within the parent ego state. So that's the second order. So we know the second order ego states in the child is natural, little professor, and adapted. The second order ego states in the parent is nurturing parent, critical parent, incomplete parent, and prejudicial parents. Then another term is injunctions. Injunctions are the messages we receive from parents to form the ego states. They cause us to make certain early life decisions. So remember in transactional analysis, Eric Bernet believed that messages learned about self in childhood determine whether a person is good or bad. And in transactional analysis, they use, which is used by psychoanalysis to help the clients determine their ego states in order to understand their behavior. So, injunctions are the messages we receive from parents to form the ego states. They cause us to make certain early life decisions. So, we have transference. The client displaces emotions felt toward a parent or significant other onto the analysis counselor or therapist. That's transference, is when the client displaces emotions felt toward someone else onto the therapist or counselor. Transference is a form of projection, displacement, and repetition. And so we know projection is a defense mechanism where you project one's own feelings onto someone else. So what you think about yourself, you try and imply that someone else thinks about you that way. Um, Displacement is taking your anger out on a safe target. And then repetition is treating someone in the same manner as they would a figure from the past. So, transferring is when the client displaces emotion felt toward a parent or significant other onto the counselor or therapist. It's a form of projection, displacement, and repetition. Projection places your feelings about yourself onto someone else. Displacement, take out anger/feelings on a safe target. Repetition, treating someone in the same manner as they would a figure from their past. So we have transference neurosis is when the client attaches to the counselor as if he or she is a substitute parent. So, transference neurosis is when the client attaches to the counselor as if he or she is a substitute parent. It was popularly used by Freudians. That was transference neurosis. And then we have countertransference is when the counselor's strong feelings or attachment to the client are strong enough to hinder the treatment process, or when the counselor's past is projected onto the client and the helper's objectivity suffers markedly. So countertransference can happen two ways, but countertransference comes from the counselor. So that means your feelings as a counselor is strong where it will hinder the treatment process, or things from your past is projected. So, oh, I was molested, so I, you must feel this way. No, but that's how you as a counselor feel, not how the client feels. So TA therapists are most likely to incorporate Gestalt in the treatment process. TA is cognitive, while Gestalt is experiential. However, this marriage is positive. So Gestalt emphasizes the affective exploration that was missing from TA, which is very intellectual. So TA approach is like, okay, these are things that was said to you as a child, and you labeled yourself as good or bad. So within that child, you can operate from those three ego states: the child, the adult, or the parent. And then you can have a second order, what was it? Second order structural analysis. Um, the critical parent, the nurturing parent, the prejudicial parent, incomplete parent. And then in the child, it was the natural child, little professor, and adapted child. So that is intellectual. This is what happened. This is now let's understand it. But just thought is more so exploration. Let's explore. So that's why the marriage between the two is so great, because it brings those two aspects together: the effective exploration and the intellectual approach. TA asserts that healthy communication transactions occur where vectors of communication run parallel, resulting in a complementary transaction in which you can get an appropriate predicted response. So, communication is very important, because remember, it's based off what the a parent communicated to a child. So now communication is important for you to move forward. So it asserts that healthy communication transactions occur where vectors of communication run parallel. So when communication runs parallel, that is said to be a complementary transaction. That's when you get an appropriate and predicted response, because we run in parallel. We on the same page. Cross transactions is when vectors from a message sent and a message received do not run parallel. They cross. It results in a deadlock of communication or a host of hurtful feelings, not conducive to healthy communication. TA often uses diagrams or pictorial representations in treatment.